The scream cut through the restaurant like breaking glass. Sharp, desperate, unstoppable. An 8-year-old boy clung to his chair, trembling. His father, a millionaire in an impeccable suit, whispered useless words beside him. "Please, Matthew. Please." Everyone stared. No one helped. Forks hung in the air. Chicago's most expensive restaurant held its breath. And then, a waitress approached. Matthew wasn't screaming out of defiance. He was screaming from pain. His small hands pressed against his ears as if trying to stop a storm only he could feel. His little body trembled with each sound that pierced him like knives. Robert Mitchell, the millionaire real estate developer who could buy entire city blocks, knelt beside his son. His hands trembled as he tried to touch him, but each caress only triggered more screams, more agony. The man who controlled empires couldn't control the suffering of what he loved most. The stares were like daggers. An elderly woman whispered something cruel to her husband. An executive called the waiter with impatient gestures. Some pulled out their phones, not to help, but to record someone else's misfortune. "Sorry," Robert whispered to no one, his voice broken like wet paper. "Sorry for existing. Sorry for trying to let my son exist too." But from the shadows of the elegant restaurant, someone had been watching them with different eyes. Lucy Johnson, 42 years old, hair pulled back, black uniform, nearly invisible to the wealthy diners. But she saw what others couldn't see. She approached slowly, ignoring the reproachful looks from her supervisor, ignoring the protocol that ordered her to keep her distance. She reached them and did something no one expected. She sat on the floor, next to the screaming boy, without saying a word. If this story already touched your heart in the first few seconds, subscribe. Here we share stories that restore faith in humanity. The restaurant, the Golden Crystal, had never known such expectation-filled silence. Lucy remained seated on the cold marble floor, knees bent and hands still on her lap. She didn't look directly at Matthew. She didn't try to touch him. She didn't speak to him. She simply was there, like a safe harbor in the middle of the storm. Robert watched her with amazement. In 3 years of crises like this, no one had ever approached without judging. Everyone always wanted him to take his son away, make him quiet, disappear from their elegant sight. "Miss, I don't know how to thank you," Robert began. But Lucy gently raised a hand, asking for silence without taking her gaze from the boy. Matthew's screams continued, but something had changed in their intensity, as if that silent presence had created a bubble of calm in the middle of chaos. Lucy knew that pain, not from personal experience but from years of observation. In 5 years working there, she had seen hundreds of families, had learned to read looks, gestures, stories no one told. She had seen ashamed parents, misunderstood children, worlds crumbling in silence. But she had never seen anything like this. A father who didn't give up. A man who could buy everything, but who would give everything for 5 minutes of peace for his son. "Too many sounds," Lucy whispered, so low that only Robert could hear her. "His world is full of noise we can't hear." Robert nodded, tears rolling down his cheeks without being able to stop them. "The doctors say it's sensory overload, but I don't know how to help him. I don't know how to be the father he needs." Matthew rocked back and forth, his small fists hitting his own ears. His blonde hair was damp with sweat. His little face reddened from the effort of expressing pain that had no words. Lucy observed every detail with a mother's precision. The boy's tense muscles, the way he avoided the direct light from the chandelier above his table, how his eyes moved desperately, searching for something, anything that would bring relief. That's when she saw it. On the next table, a glass with ice. The cubes floated, spinning slowly, creating small flashes of light that danced on the crystal like trapped fireflies. Without saying a word, Lucy got up from the floor. She walked to that table, took the glass with ice, and ignored the indignant look from the diners. She returned and sat again next to Matthew. She placed the glass on the floor, where the lamp's light could pass through the ice and create small rainbows dancing on the white marble. For the first time in 20 minutes, Matthew stopped screaming. What had Lucy seen that no one else could see? Why did a simple glass with ice achieve what words couldn't? The silence was so sudden it seemed supernatural. Matthew had stopped screaming, but his little body still trembled like a leaf in autumn. His eyes, large and green like emeralds, fixed on the flashes dancing on the floor. The small rainbows moved gently, hypnotic, beautiful, predictable. Robert couldn't believe what he was seeing. His son, for the first time in months, wasn't screaming in public. He wasn't hitting himself. He wasn't fleeing from a world that hurt him. "How did you know?" Robert asked with a trembling voice. Lucy kept her gaze on Matthew, watching him with the concentration of someone who understood this was the most fragile moment. Like when an injured bird begins to trust. One wrong move, one too loud sound, one too bright light, and everything could collapse again. "Because I really looked at him," Lucy responded. "The others only saw him scream. I saw a boy asking for help." Fresh tears sprouted in Robert's eyes. Not from shame this time, but from relief. For the first time in years, someone didn't see his son as a problem to solve, but as a person to understand. Lucy watched how Matthew's shoulders began to relax millimeter by millimeter, how his breathing, previously broken by sobs, found a more measured rhythm. She saw an intelligent, sensitive boy who perceived the world differently, but no less valuably. In her uniform pocket, Lucy always carried small objects, not for work, but from habit inherited from her grandmother. A smooth coin, a pearl button, a small crystal she found at the beach. They were her good luck charms, her small treasures. Slowly, she took out the coin. It was old, polished by years of being caressed by nervous fingers. She placed it next to the glass with ice, where the light could also touch it and make it shine. Matthew looked at it. His eyes followed the soft gleam of the coin like a child following a star. "Do you have children?" Robert whispered. Lucy shook her head but didn't take her eyes off Matthew. "No, but I have a heart, and eyes that know how to see." It was a simple answer, but it said everything. Because the difference between looking and seeing is enormous. The entire restaurant had looked at Matthew with annoyance. Only Lucy had seen him with compassion. Matthew extended a trembling hand toward the coin, but stopped before touching it. He looked at Lucy, as if asking for permission no one had asked of him before. She gave him the smallest of smiles and nodded. Matthew's little fingers touched the smooth surface of the coin. Its texture, soft and warm, seemed to calm him even more. He began sliding it between his fingers, exploring each curve, each familiar surface. "He needs things he can predict," Lucy explained in a very low voice. "Textures he can control, a world that doesn't scare him." Robert nodded, absorbing each word as if it were the map to his son's heart. But then, something changed in the restaurant's atmosphere. The manager approached with firm steps, his expression clearly annoyed. His shiny leather shoes sounded like hammering against the newly found silence. "Mrs. Johnson," he said with a cold voice, "I need to speak with you." Could a restaurant's protocol destroy the small miracle that had just been born? Would someone dare to break the peace that had cost so much to find? Robert rose from the floor like a guardian protecting his most sacred territory. "If you have something to say to someone," Robert said with a controlled but steel-firm voice, "you can say it to me." The manager, a middle-aged man accustomed to commanding, hesitated. He knew Robert Mitchell very well. He knew his bank account. He knew his power to change any business's destiny with a single call. "Mr. Mitchell, I just thought that maybe it would be better if the lady returned to her duties." "Her duties?" Robert raised an eyebrow, his voice loading with cold anger. "What duties are more important than helping a suffering child?" The manager looked nervously toward the other diners. Some continued watching the scene with curiosity. Others pretended not to see, but everyone listened to every word. Lucy remained motionless next to Matthew, who continued exploring the coin with fingers that had found their first moment of calm in hours. She knew this situation well. She had been invisible for so long that she had almost gotten used to contempt. But this time was different. This time, someone was fighting for her. "Sorry, sir," the manager murmured, backing away like someone backing away from a lion. "Of course, I was just concerned that other clients—" "Other clients," Robert repeated the words as if they were poison, "should learn what this woman's humanity means." The manager nodded quickly and withdrew, but not without first directing a cold look toward Lucy. She knew that look. It was the silent promise that this would have consequences. But at that moment, something magical happened. An elderly woman from the corner table approached slowly. Her steps were careful, her expression soft. In her hands, she carried a small potted cactus that had been decorating her table. "Excuse me," she said to Lucy with a gentle voice. "I thought maybe the boy would like to touch this. It's very soft." The elderly woman was called Margaret. She was 70 years old and had just remembered her own grandson with autism who lived in another city. Lucy looked at Robert, who nodded with still moist eyes. She took the small cactus and brought it close to Matthew. The boy's little fingers touched the small, soft protuberances of the plant. Its texture, so different from the coin but equally predictable, calmed him even more. For the first time that night, Matthew looked up. His green eyes met Lucy's, and in them, for an infinite second, something shone that Robert hadn't seen in months. A smile, small, shy, but real. Could that small smile change the course of the entire night? Was it possible that a boy who lived in silence was finding his first window to the world? That smile was like the first ray of sun after a terrible storm. Robert felt his heart swell so much it might explode. In 3 years, he had seen his son smile only 5 times. And never, ever, had it been because of a stranger who decided to stay. "Are you hungry?" Lucy asked Matthew softly, but without expecting a verbal response. She had learned that sometimes words weren't necessary. Matthew continued caressing the cactus, but this time looked toward the restaurant's kitchen, where cooks worked behind a glass window. The blue flames from the stoves shone like small stars, creating a visual pattern that seemed to fascinate him. Lucy followed his gaze. "Do you like the lights?" she asked. This time, Matthew nodded. Very slowly, but he nodded. Robert wiped away his tears. His son had responded to a question. His son had communicated something. "There's a place in the restaurant," Lucy said thoughtfully, "where the lights are softer, and there are little fish." In the back of the golden crystal, there was an enormous aquarium, 6 feet tall, with tropical fish swimming in eternal circles under soft blue lights. It was the quietest area of the place, away from the kitchen noise and most tables. Robert hesitated. "Do you think we can—" "We can try," Lucy responded, "but step by step, as he needs." Lucy slowly got up from the floor and offered her hand to Matthew. Not to pull him, but as an invitation. The boy looked at her, looked at his father, and then, almost miraculously, put his little hand in hers. His skin was soft and warm, and for the first time in years, Matthew had chosen human contact. The 3 walked slowly toward the back of the restaurant. Each step was a silent negotiation. If Matthew tensed up, they stopped. If he looked back nervously, they waited. If he needed to touch something along the way, they allowed it. Other diners watched them walk, but something had changed in those looks. They were no longer judgmental looks, but curious ones. Some even smiled with tenderness. Margaret, the lady who had offered the cactus, winked at them from her table. When they reached the aquarium, Matthew stood motionless in front of the giant glass. Inside, dozens of impossibly colored fish swam in perfect formations. Golden angelfish, orange and white clownfish, electric blue fish that looked like bits of sky swimming. The soft blue light enveloped them like a liquid embrace. For the first time that night, Matthew spoke. "Pretty," he whispered. Robert covered his mouth with both hands. His son had spoken. His son had expressed something beautiful. Lucy smiled. "Which one do you like most?" Matthew pointed to a small silver fish that swam alone near the glass. It was different from the others, more shy, more cautious. "That one is like you," Lucy said softly. "Special and perfect as he is." Matthew pressed his little palm against the glass. The silver fish approached from the other side, as if it also felt that mysterious connection. At that moment, sitting on the floor next to the aquarium, with the blue light bathing their faces, the three formed a small temporary family. Robert, the millionaire who had learned that money didn't buy understanding; Lucy, the waitress who had discovered that her real talent wasn't serving tables, but serving hearts; and Matthew, the boy who had found his first refuge in a too noisy world. "I don't know how to thank you," Robert whispered to Lucy. "Don't thank me," she responded. "Teach the world to see as I see Matthew. That will be enough." But then, from the shadows, the manager appeared again. This time he didn't come alone. He came with the restaurant owner. Could this perfect night have a bitter ending? Or had the time come for someone to defend not only Matthew, but also Lucy? The restaurant owner was a 60-year-old man, silver hair, eyes tired from having seen too many people pretend to be who they weren't. His name was Tony Williams, and he had built the Golden Crystal with his own hands 30 years ago. He approached slowly to the aquarium corner, where Matthew continued hypnotized by the fish swimming in infinite circles. His steps were measured, reflective, like someone who had learned that important decisions aren't made in a hurry. "Mr. Mitchell," Tony said with a measured voice, "my manager has brought me up to speed on the situation." Robert tensed, preparing for another battle. He had learned to recognize that formal tone that generally preceded polite apologies and invitations to leave. But there was something different in this man's voice. There was no rush. There was no annoyance. There was curiosity. Tony looked at Matthew, who kept his little palm pressed against the aquarium glass. Then he looked at Lucy, who remained seated next to the boy like a silent guardian. His experienced eyes, which had seen thousands of scenes in his restaurant, had never witnessed something like this. "In 30 years of this business," Tony continued, "I've seen everything. Celebrations that ended in fights, fights that ended in celebrations, marriage proposals that were rejected, farewells that became reunions. But I had never seen this." "This?" Robert asked, confused. "Real compassion," Tony responded, his eyes fixed on Lucy. "Miss Johnson, could you explain to me what happened here?" Lucy looked up, expecting the final scolding, the firing she knew was coming. She had worked in enough places to know the protocol. When an employee causes problems with clients, especially important clients, the consequences were predictable. But in Tony's eyes, there was no anger. There was something that seemed respect. "The boy needed silence," Lucy said simply, "and someone who understood him." Tony nodded slowly. "And you understood him?" "Not completely," Lucy admitted with honesty. That surprised even Robert. "But I wanted to try. Sometimes you don't need to understand everything to be able to help. You just need to be there." For several minutes that seemed eternal. Tony observed the scene with the concentration of a scientist studying a new phenomenon. He saw how Matthew had relaxed completely, his breathing measured, his muscles without tension. He saw how Robert no longer trembled with anxiety, how his hands had stopped gripping the table edge like a lifeline. He saw how other diners approached discreetly, not to bother or judge, but to smile from a distance, as if they were witnesses to something sacred. Margaret, the elderly lady who had offered the cactus, approached the owner with cautious steps. "Excuse me," she said in a low voice, "but that woman just taught us something beautiful about human kindness. In 70 years of life, I have rarely seen something so pure. A businessman from the center table also approached. "Mr. Williams," he said, "I'm a pediatric doctor. What just happened here is extraordinary. That lady has a natural gift for working with neurodivergent children." Tony looked around the restaurant. Conversations had returned, but they were different, softer, more conscious. Waiters moved with less hurry. Diners spoke in lower tones, as if everyone had been touched by something that had changed them a little. The atmosphere of the place had transformed from a cold and elegant space to something warmer, more human. "Miss Johnson," Tony said finally, turning toward Lucy, "would you like to work with me on something completely new?" Lucy blinked, confused. For 5 years, she had been practically invisible in this place. Clients saw her as part of the furniture, useful, but without personality of her own. "Sir? I'm thinking of creating a program," Tony explained, his eyes shining with an idea that seemed to take shape as he spoke. "For families with children who need a more understanding environment. Softer lights, less noise, staff trained to understand neurodivergent differences. We could have special nights, maybe Tuesdays, when the restaurant transforms completely. Do you think it would be useful?" Robert's eyes lit up as if he had just seen dawn after the longest night of his life. "Are you serious?" "Completely," Tony responded. "I've been thinking about this for years but never knew how to start. Until now. And I would like you, Miss Johnson, to lead that training, to design the protocol, to teach us to see as you see." For the first time in 5 years of work, Lucy felt someone saw her not as a replaceable employee, but as a person with something valuable to offer the world. "I don't know much about autism," Lucy said humbly. "I don't have university studies. I just worked at an elementary school before coming here and—" "But you know a lot about seeing," Tony interrupted softly. "And that's more important than any manual or university degree. Manuals teach protocols. You have something that can't be taught. Intuition. Heart." The doctor who had spoken before approached again. "Miss, my name is Dr. Richardson. I run a pediatric neurology clinic. What you did here, some of my colleagues with 20 years of experience wouldn't have known how to handle that situation so well. Matthew chose that moment to do something extraordinary. He moved away from the aquarium for the first time in half an hour, walked to Tony with sure steps, and offered him the coin that Lucy had given him. "For you," Matthew whispered, offering his most precious treasure to this stranger who had spoken with kindness about the woman who had helped him. Tony knelt to be at the boy's height, his knees protesting against the cold marble. "Is it yours?" Matthew shook his head and pointed to Lucy. "She gave it to me. But you're good, too. Good people help each other." Tony took the coin with hands that trembled slightly. In 30 years of business, he had received million-dollar payments, extravagant tips from satisfied clients, expensive gifts from suppliers wanting favors. But he had never received anything as valuable as a child's trust, who rarely trusted strangers. "Thank you, Matthew," Tony said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll take very good care of it, and I promise this restaurant will always be a safe place for you and for children like you." Margaret applauded softly from her table, and soon other diners joined in discreet but sincere applause. It wasn't the type of noisy ovation that would have scared Matthew, but the silent recognition of having witnessed something beautiful. Robert took out his wallet, but Tony raised a hand. "Tonight dinner is on the house. It's the least I can do after what we've learned here." "No, please," Robert insisted. "Let me do something. This woman has done more for my son in 1 hour than many professionals have achieved in years of therapy." Robert took out a $500 bill, but instead of giving it to Tony, he gave it to Lucy. He took a pen from his jacket and, using a napkin as support, wrote something on the back of the bill. "Read it when you get home," he told Lucy. But his voice had an urgency that suggested he himself needed her to read it now. Lucy couldn't wait. The aquarium's soft lights provided perfect illumination to read the words written in careful handwriting. "You didn't just teach us to see Matthew as he really is. You taught us to see ourselves as we could be. Thank you for reminding us that humanity still exists in a world that sometimes seems to have forgotten it. With eternal gratitude, Robert and Matthew Mitchell below was a phone number and one more line. Call me if you ever need anything, always. This is my promise. Lucy felt tears running down her cheeks without being able to stop them. In 5 years of hard work, forced smiles with difficult clients, cleaning tables late at night, she had never imagined that someone could see so much value in what she had considered simply being human. "There's something else," Robert said, taking out his phone. "May I take a photograph? Not to publish anywhere, but to remember this moment. To show Matthew when he's older that there was a night when a stranger changed his life." Tony nodded. "But let's let Matthew decide." Robert crouched next to his son. "Would you like us to take a photo together with Lucy and the fish? To remember this special night?" Matthew looked at Lucy, then at the fish, then at his father. "Do the fish come out in the photo too?" "If you want," Robert responded. "Yes," Matthew said, and for the first time that night he smiled broadly. The photograph Robert took that night would become, years later, the iconic image of the neurodiversity restaurant movement that would spread across the country. In it, Lucy was seated on the floor next to the aquarium, Matthew beside her pressing his hand against the glass, and tropical fish swimming behind them like a kaleidoscope of colors. Robert had captured without knowing it the exact moment when an act of kindness became the seed of social change. But at that moment, while the phone's camera captured the image, all that mattered was the comfortable silence that had replaced chaos, the smile on a boy's face who rarely smiled, and the mutual understanding among 3 adults who had learned something profound about human nature. Dr. Richardson approached Lucy again. "Miss, I would like to invite you to give a talk at my clinic. My colleagues need to hear about your approach. Would you be interested?" Lucy looked at Tony, who nodded enthusiastically. "Of course. Anything that can help more families like Matthew's." "Perfect," the doctor said, handing her his card. "I'll call you tomorrow." Margaret also approached, with her 70 years walking slowly but with determination. "Dear," she said to Lucy, "I have a grandson in Boston with autism. His parents have been struggling for years. Do you think you could talk to them? Give them hope that things can be different?" "Mrs. Margaret," Lucy responded, taking the elderly woman's wrinkled hands. "I'll be happy to talk to any family that needs to hear they're not alone." Tony watched all this with a growing smile. In 30 years of business, he had seen many memorable nights in his restaurant, but never one that generated so much real human connection. "Lucy," he said finally, "I think we're witnessing the birth of something very special. Are you ready to change not only this restaurant, but maybe the way the entire industry thinks about inclusion?" Lucy looked at Matthew, who now explored each fish in the aquarium with quiet fascination. She looked at Robert, whose tears had been replaced by something that seemed like genuine hope for the first time in years. She looked at Margaret, at Dr. Richardson, at the other diners who had approached with respect and admiration. "I don't know if I'm ready," Lucy admitted, "but I know I want to try. If we can make even one more family feel welcome, let one more child dine in peace, then all the effort is worth it." Could one night change 3 lives forever? Was it possible that an act of kindness could create waves that would reach further than any of them had imagined? Was something being born that would transform not only a restaurant, but an entire industry? 6 months later, the golden crystal had changed, not only in its decoration, but in its soul. Every Tuesday night from 7 to 9, the restaurant transformed. Lights dimmed, music silenced, staff spoke in whispers. It was Family Night, a program that had started as an experiment and had become the place's pride. Lucy was no longer just a waitress. She was the program coordinator, the woman who trained other employees about neurodiversity, the person who had converted her intuition into a method that other restaurants now wanted to copy. That Tuesday night, like all the others, several families filled the tables. Children with autism, Down syndrome, ADHD, and others who simply needed a gentler world. At table 7, the same one where it all began, were Robert and Matthew. But this time, Matthew wasn't screaming. He played silently with a special set of sensory objects that the restaurant now provided. Soft textures, small lights, figures he could move between his fingers. "How is he today?" Lucy asked, approaching their favorite table. "Ask him," Robert responded with a smile. Lucy crouched to Matthew's height. "How are you, little one?" Matthew looked up, his green eyes shining under the soft light. "Good," he said clearly. "Can we see the fish afterward?" "Of course," Lucy responded. It was a simple, everyday conversation, but for Robert, each word from his son continued to be a miracle. That night, after all the families left, Lucy stayed cleaning the tables as always, but now she did it with a smile, because she knew that tomorrow she would receive calls from other restaurants asking for advice. Because she knew she had found her real purpose in life. Tony approached her with an envelope in his hands. "What's this?" Lucy asked. "A letter that arrived for you," Tony responded. "From overseas." Lucy opened the envelope with curiosity. Inside was a photograph and a handwritten letter. The photograph showed a small girl, about 6 years old, sitting next to an aquarium. She had a huge smile and was holding a stuffed fish in her arms. The letter said, "Dear Lucy, my name is Sarah. I have autism and live in London with my parents. My dad read about your program on the internet and flew to America just to visit the restaurant and learn from you. Now we've opened the first Golden Crystal in London, and I can dine out for the first time in my life. In the photo, I'm at our aquarium, thinking of you and Matthew. Thank you for teaching us that being different doesn't mean being broken. With love, Sarah and family." Lucy felt tears running down her cheeks. Her small act of kindness had crossed oceans. It had reached a girl in London who could now smile in a restaurant. "Are you okay?" Tony asked. "More than okay," Lucy responded. "I'm complete." That night, while walking home under the stars, Lucy thought about how her life had changed. 6 months ago, she was invisible. Now, dozens of families knew her by name. 6 months ago, she served food. Now she served hope. But the most beautiful thing was knowing that somewhere in the city, Matthew slept peacefully, and that tomorrow, when he woke up, he would know there was a place in the world where he could be himself without apologies. Because sometimes changing the world doesn't require grand gestures. Sometimes it just requires sitting on the floor next to someone who suffers and deciding to stay. The spring morning entered softly through the windows of the new Lucy Center for Neurodivergent Families. It was no longer just a restaurant. It was a meeting place, training, and hope. Families from across America came to learn, to connect, to discover they weren't alone. Lucy, now director of the center, reviewed the letters that arrived each day. From Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Canada. Everyone wanted to replicate the model. Everyone wanted to create spaces where being different was celebrated, not tolerated. On her desk was a framed photograph. It was from the night that changed everything. Her sitting on the floor next to Matthew, with Robert kneeling beside, under the aquarium's blue light. Tony had taken that photo without them knowing, and had given it to her months later. Next to that photograph there were other precious memories. A small old coin in a crystal frame, the same one Matthew had touched that first night. A small cactus, now grown and flowering, a gift from Margaret, who had become a volunteer at the center every Tuesday. And dozens of letters from children around the world, each telling a story of hope. The door opened softly. It was Matthew, now 11 years old, taller, more confident. He came with his father, but this time he wasn't alone. With them came a little girl about 7 years old, holding her young parents' hands as they looked around with a mixture of hope and nervousness. "Hello, Lucy," Matthew said with a clear voice. "Can we talk to you? We brought some friends." "Always," she responded, also smiling at the new family. Robert approached first. "Lucy, these are the Martinez family. Their daughter Sophia has autism. And when they met us at the park and saw how Matthew interacted with other children, they asked us to bring them here." Sophia's mother, a 30-year-old woman with tired but hopeful eyes, stepped forward. "Mrs. Lucy, excuse us for coming without an appointment, but we've heard so much about this place. Sophia has never been able to eat in a restaurant without it ending in crisis." Lucy looked at little Sophia, who hid behind her mother, her little hands clutching a small dolphin stuffed animal. In her eyes, she recognized the same expression she had seen in Matthew 3 years ago. A world too big, too noisy, too unpredictable. "You know what, Sophia?" Lucy said, crouching to her height. "We have very pretty fish here. Do you like fish?" Sophia nodded very slowly, without letting go of her dolphin-stuffed animal. Matthew approached the desk and put something on it. It was a folded letter, written in a child's careful handwriting. "I wrote it for you," Matthew said, "to say thank you. But I also wanted Sophia to hear it." Lucy unfolded the letter. It was illustrated with drawings of colorful fish and said, "Dear Lucy, before I met you, the world was very noisy and hurt me. Now I know there are safe places and people who understand. You taught me that being sad is okay, and that being different is also okay. When I grow up, I want to help other children like you helped me. Thank you for seeing me when no one else saw me. With love, your friend Matthew. P.S. Dad says you're an angel. I think you're better. You're a friend." Lucy felt her heart fill so much it might overflow. She looked at Robert, who had tears in his eyes. Then she looked at Sophia's parents, who had listened to every word with amazement. "Do you know what's the most beautiful thing about all this?" Lucy said. "What?" Matthew asked. "That you saved me more than I saved you." Robert smiled. "How is that possible?" "Because you taught me that my real job was never serving tables," Lucy explained. "My job was always serving hearts. I just needed someone to help me discover it." Matthew approached and, for the first time since that night at the restaurant, hugged Lucy. It wasn't a shy or nervous hug. It was the hug of someone who had learned that affection, freely given, can heal entire worlds. But then something magical happened. Sophia let go of her mother's hand and shyly approached Matthew. "Is Lucy your mom?" she asked in a very low voice. "No," Matthew responded with a smile, "but she's like a mom of the heart. And now she can be yours too." Sophia looked at Lucy with curiosity. "Do you have real fish?" "Many," Lucy responded. "Would you like to meet them?" "Will you come to lunch with us?" Matthew asked. "At the aquarium. Sophia can come too." "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Lucy responded. While they walked together toward the dining room, now an extended family of 6 people, where families lunched under soft lights while fish swam in eternal circles, Lucy thought about how a single night had changed the course of so many lives. Along the way, they passed by a new addition to the center, a gallery of photographs on the wall. They were images of all the families who had found refuge there. Children smiling next to the aquarium, parents hugging their children in peace, trained employees helping with infinite patience. In the center of all those photographs, there was a golden plaque that said, "Founded in memory of a night when a waitress decided to sit on the floor. Dedicated to all who choose to stay when others leave." Matthew pointed to the plaque as they walked. "Dad says they're going to make a movie about you," he told Lucy. "A movie?" she asked, surprised. Robert nodded. "A director saw the report they did about the center on television. He wants to tell your story so it reaches more families in the world." "But it's not my story," Lucy protested. "It's Matthew's story. It's all of your stories." "It's all of our stories," Robert corrected, "because no one is the same after meeting you." When they reached the main dining room, Lucy saw something that filled her with emotion. At a special table next to the aquarium was Margaret, now 73 years old, reading a story to 3 small children. One of them was her own great-grandson who had come to visit her from another city. Tony, now Lucy's full partner in expanding the concept, approached with his characteristic warm smile. "Lucy," he said, "did you see this morning's news?" "What news?" "The government announced they're going to create a national law based on our model. All restaurants in the country will have to offer neurodivergent nights at least once a week." Lucy was speechless. From a small seed of kindness planted one crisis night, something had grown that would now change the lives of thousands of families nationwide. Because kindness, she discovered, isn't just an act, it's a seed. And when planted at the exact moment, in the exact heart, it can grow to become an entire forest of hope. On the dining room wall, framed in gold, was a phrase Lucy had written months ago. It was the center's philosophy, the words that guided each day. "You didn't just change one night. You changed our lives, and now, together, we're changing the world." Walking past that phrase, Matthew pointed to it and smiled. Then he took Sophia's hand and whispered something in her ear. The girl smiled for the first time since she had arrived. "You know what, Lucy?" Matthew said. "What, little one?" "I think the fish are also happy you exist. And now Sophia is going to be happy here too." Sophia nodded and let go of her dolphin-stuffed animal for the first time in months to press her little hand against the aquarium glass, just as Matthew had done 3 years ago. And at that moment, while watching a new girl find her refuge in the same place where Matthew had found his, Lucy knew she had found something no money could buy. She had found her place in the world. A place where being different was a gift. A place where every heart had value. A place where no one would ever be alone again. A place where every day a new family discovered they weren't broken. They just needed to be seen with different eyes. And while the afternoon sun bathed the aquarium with golden light, and children laughed softly next to the fish, and parents could finally breathe in peace, Lucy understood the most beautiful truth of all, that sometimes saving one person can end up saving the entire world, one story at a time, one heart at a time, one act of kindness at a time. If this story touched your heart, share it, because somewhere there's a family that needs to know they're not alone. Somewhere there's a child waiting for someone to sit next to them on the floor, and maybe, just maybe, your sharing will be the bridge that connects them with hope. Subscribe for more stories that remind us that humanity still exists. Because the world needs more Lucys. And maybe that person is you. Because sometimes changing a life is as simple as deciding to stay when everyone else leaves. And that can change everything.